You subscribe to Pando? That's so hot. You subscribe to Pando? That's so hot.
Hey, at least people get to hear Miranda with the sub sound, right? So, hello everyone, welcome. A lot of little issues today. First of all, I I think the sound stuff I sorted out actually. There was a little sound issue. Guys, let me know if there was anything going on or if there's something going on during the episode. But I think I figured that one out. Then Miranda can't make it. She's a little in pain. And it's her birthday of all days. So happy birthday, Miranda. Sorry you're not feeling well today. But she can't make it. Then Piggles had to cancel last minute. He thought it's on a Saturday. So he's like, wait a second, it's today. So, he was drowned in work. So he had to cancel. Seto, to be fair, Seto is delayed, but we knew that from the start. He said right away, like, yeah, it's gonna be too close to me for me for work. So he's delayed, but that's it's part of the plan. And then now my bot broke on top of it. So, but that's in the good old Eve fashion, and that's where we strive, right? That's if it was easy, we wouldn't do it. So let me introduce you to the guests today, because this is actually the second episode where we get CSM candidates on. And today, I think all three have one thing in common. They're not big block candidates, but they have a decent chance of getting actually elected. Right? There's a lot of people running. What was it, 48 people or something? 46 applied?
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah. So, but let's be quite honest. You get like 20 of those names. They're gonna get like less than 100 votes or so. It's very unlikely that most of them will even get close to getting elected. But I'm always very interested in getting at least one or two guys on there that are not necessarily in one of the big blocks. And so Suitonia did it before. He actually got onto the CSM. I think most people, especially on Twitch, you guys are very aware who he is. Has also been on the podcast before. Streamer and a very skilled solo and small scale guy. And yeah, I think most people are pretty aware. Then our second guest, who's actually delayed today, sadly, is Seto. He used to be in Test, and that's where he actually became more of a household name as an FC. He left Test for a smaller group. I'm actually not quite sure, and I have to ask him how exactly it is right now in Dreadbomb. If he's the leader, like if he's the top guy there, or if he's still kind of like part of the group trying to just support. But I'm pretty sure he's like leading Dreadbomb and trying to build that group up, which is a kind of a unique thing too. Like only a few people ever go out and try to build their own group. And I think that's an interesting perspective also to have for the CSM, like for CCP, right? To have someone to talk to, like what are the challenges there. So that's Seto. Yeah, Seto is not on yet. He'll jump in a few minutes, right? Because he's just driving home from work. That's exactly the same as last time. It just doesn't fit with the timing too well. Maybe I should have pushed that episode an hour later, but yeah. And then our third guest is Stitch. So Stitch is probably not as well known in overall in Eve, but in the small scale community, I think he is a household name, and has been the hope for a lot of people when it comes to the CSM, but he fell short. I think twice you got kind of close to getting elected onto the CSM, right?
Yeah. First time I was pretty close. Second time there was a gap.
Yeah. I mean, first time I remember because you were actually on the internet ballot, pretty much on number one spot. But it's challenging as a small scale theory crafter to get your name out there and get people to vote for you, right? While all the big guys, like all the big groups, they all know their own guys, right? There's always a candidate. Oh yeah, that's my FC, right? Surely people like just straight up vote for these guys. So I think in that regard, it's very interesting that the three guys here today, you guys have a solid shot, and you're the hopes for a lot of people when it comes to solo, small scale theory crafting kind of dudes, like straight up content creators on a smaller scale. So that kind of leads me to one question right away, which is, are you guys like making deals and stuff like the big guys do, like getting on each other's ballot and all that stuff? Are you guys trying to do that, or are you guys just hoping for the best?
I mean, for me personally, I'm not looking to try and get on any big ballots at this moment. I never have on any of my campaigns. Even on my first one, I think I was approached by you originally. Like I never went out to do that. Um, it's just kind of I want to try and get through the independent way best I can. That may never happen without going through that ballot process, but I want to give it a try, and uh, I stay active through the community through Reddit and Discords and things like that, and trying to get wormhole backing. So we'll kind of see how that all compiles in the end on this third try here.
Yeah. So how about you, Suitonia? Like, you did get elected before. Did you like do any of the political stuff? If you want to talk
No,
about.
not really. I think I was like number 6 on the goon ballot, but I never asked them to put me there, and I'm pretty sure they just put me there because I was a goon technically at the time because I was in Karma Fleet. But
Oh right.
and the time after I believe I wasn't on any ballot. I think I was like on the Winnaco ballot or something at like number 4 or something like that. But I never approached them to put me there. So I'm not really involved in any like organized like block voting.
So also maybe what's happening then is like, so when the blocks have like the number 4, number 5, number 6 slot, they put like the best name they can see on that, and that just happens to be you, and you profit from that. So especially since you put your name out there quite a bit, right? You're on shows all the time, not just like for the campaign or anything, but just like you're out there, right? So people know you well, and they know what they get, right?
Right.
Yeah, a little bit, I guess. I stream regularly, and I'm really bad at making YouTube videos now. I only make one like maybe 2 or 3 a year. Stitch also makes like a ton of like really cool like solo battleship PvP videos. So I think most of the people in like the BSB and small gang community know who me and Stitch are.
Yeah. I mean, I try to be more consistent with my videos this year. Did a few new things like my theory balance videos, and tried to format my videos to be easier to digest for like even newer people. So I explain things, and then with like just getting my name out there more. I do a lot of balance posts on Reddit, not necessarily in the hopes of changing something, but more just because I like the discussion. Sometimes you learn things, so that kind of gets a lot of discussion where people kind of know who I am through those posts, and we can talk about things I may not be aware of, things they may not be aware of. So I think it's overall just pretty good for the community just to have those discussions.
Yeah. On Talking Station is just hosted. Hey guys, um, Those 55 are probably also very aware of you guys. I don't have to reintroduce you. Yeah, Norman. Oh, I thought PGL. Yeah, he didn't make it. I'm sorry. He had to cancel like on short notice. But he will make the next or the one after, and we'll get him on then. So when it comes to CSM stuff, right? What do you guys think, or especially Suitonia, since you have been on there before? What do you think is the most important quality a CSM candidate should have?
I think you just need to first of all, you need to like be a pretty reasonable sounding board for ideas, and also just be someone who is able to give constructive feedback to CCP. You know, not knee-jerk react to things, but also like provide useful feedback. Be able to like think things through logically when like CCP shows you an idea.
Yeah,
So mostly just being constructive, I would say.
and then basically put your bias away a little bit. Everyone's biased to a degree, right? But yeah.
Sure, yeah, but if CCP shows you something, and let's say it's like something that's really terrible, which happens a lot when you're on the CSM, you gotta explain to them why it's bad. You can't just say, guys, what you can't just say like, guys, what the fuck, and then start freaking out about it. You have to explain to them why it's bad. Otherwise, you're just gonna annoy them as well.
Yeah, so
and they're gonna get defensive, and then they're probably not gonna listen to the CSM as much as they should.
So what I always think is like probably one of the hardest parts is when there's a meeting, they bring something to you, and then in that moment you already have to know kind of if it's good or bad, right? Like that's if you wait too long, you might just miss that moment, or it might already be too late anyway, right? Maybe they're going ahead with it no matter what, but only tiny changes can be made, so you have to be able to compromise, right? Like I think that's probably gonna be that's probably like one of the most challenging aspects, right?
Yeah, for sure.
So like what do you think, like there's different types of CSM candidates, right? Or CSM representatives. Some people I would say are really good at that part. Some people are better at bringing feedback from the community to them, right? And then you have the subject matter experts like that are only good at like certain areas, or especially good at certain areas. So like what do you think, where do you shine, or where do you like where you different to the other candidates?
Well, for me personally, I feel like I know like solo small gang balance pretty well. I understand the challenges of finding content, creating content as a small guy. I also play the game pretty much daily. I stream 4 times out of the week, mostly doing solo PvP. So I'm logging in every day and seeing what happens. And I'm just a line member in my alliance as well, even though I mostly do my own independent thing. So I'm not the person who's in a diplomat role or something. I see things from the ground up.
Yeah. And then how about you, Stitch?
Yeah, I mean, for me, a lot of it reflects off of Suitonia, since he's kind of in the same position as I am, or doing the same things. But I think one of the things that make me stand out a little bit differently is that I am a single account, single character Eve player. So I don't have any alts. I play just completely with my one character.
Rare.
Yeah.
I couldn't imagine, to be quite honest.
Originally, it started out as I was just, I generally play games as hard as I can because Eve has kind of ruined me. But even before Eve, I would generally play as hard as I could, just to make the games more interesting. But then it kind of evolved into something else when I was a newer player, or even when I started first going into PvP. You'd hear a lot of people saying, oh, well, you need to have an alt to do this. And as time's gone along, I agree with that mentality to an extent, but I also don't like it from like a new player perspective. because they join the game and then they get told they need to have a bunch of alts to play the game. So what I'm trying to showcase is that you can still play Eve with a single character, single account to a higher degree and still be competitive. It's just you may not be able to get instant fights like someone with alts who can scout you and things like that. So that's one thing that would set me apart on the CSMs, is that I would provide a slightly different perspective, or perspective of an actual new player or casual player, I guess you could say, someone that just doesn't have alts and wants to play a little bit more casually. But again, like I mentioned, a lot of the same things Suitonia mentioned is kind of the same seat that I'm in. Just how we interact with everything, playing from a small gang or solo perspective.
Yeah. So, shit, like you talked. I forgot the next point. I actually wanted to bring something up. Damn it. What did we talk about? The differences. Shit, I think I just lost it.
Oh, the differences between me and Stitch. He said he plays a single box.
Oh, that's the single box. What I just wanted to point out, like, is that Eve how it's meant to be played? Like, is it actually, or is it?
I mean,
by now?
is Eve meant to be played solo? It's a MMORPG, right? So.
Yeah, no, I'm not
Well,
saying
I mean,
solo.
would
I'm
say,
saying the one box thing. The single
yeah, I
box.
mean, because I do, I'll do small gang and stuff like that. So it's not necessarily that I'm playing by myself, although I have done that before. It's, like you said, main boxing, I guess is how you consider it, but just without alts. And it's debatable. Like I don't care if someone plays with alts; it's fine. Play the game how you want to play it. It's just, I think, if Eve was meant to be played that way, there's certainly some things that would be a lot more interesting. Things couldn't be taken advantage of as much. But at the same time, then you're left with certain play styles that I would consider exceedingly boring. Like, I mean, who wants to be a main flying a backpack Bifrost? You're not doing anything except linking someone. Or the same goes for like single boxing a mining ship or something. So in those cases, I definitely understand having an alt, but again, I think there's other perspectives where main boxing, if Eve was all main boxing, it would be a lot more interesting at the same time.
Yeah, that would have been my next question actually. Would it be a better world if everyone only had that one account? I probably would argue yes. I tend to say that. I don't know though. Right? I'm just. What do you think, Suitonia? Would it be a better game if it was able? Right, obviously.
I think it probably would be overall. I think there'll be a lot of like really terrible pain points though.
Yeah,
like it's hard. Like like Stitch mentioned, right? There's a lot of roles in the game that just feel like they're meant to be alts. Like, who would want to main a Sino ship? Or
that's kind of true. But you know what? That's one of the reasons why I said is it still so when the game was first made, the approach was one player, one character, right? But over all these years, a lot of those mechanics, like you just said, like a Sino ship and stuff, it's almost designed to be an alt. So did they move away from the one player, one character thing, or is it not meant to be played by one player, one character anymore?
I think it's a combination of different things, right? So the first thing is PC hardware has improved a ton, right? Even just some PC that you can buy from Walmart for like $800 can probably run like 8 accounts on it now if you play potato mode on it. So like back in the day when I used to run Eve on a laptop when I was in university, when it would like struggle to run 2 clients. It's not really quite. And that was on like a pretty expensive like Sony Val laptop as well, like in 2007. Now I think most people on like even just a budget PC, if they're on potato mode, can probably run like several accounts.
Yeah.
Right, and CCP's even made changes recently with like the graphic mode where I think it hides everything except your overview. so
Yeah.
that it's even less resource intensive to do more alts. So yeah, I mean, I'm sure CCP has shifted away from that one account mentality, just because that's how Eve has evolved. I mean, they saw people were willing to create alts, so they probably kind of catered to that to some extent. And with injectors and Rorks, it kind of snowballed, and we're maybe getting a little bit back on track again now after 5 years.
Yeah, injector and rocks, that, and we could talk about that for at least an hour. I'm guessing, right? Like, so what's your take on injectors? Was it maybe one of the biggest mistakes, or was it good for the game, or is it like somewhere in the middle, like, which is pretty much what I think. Like, there's some really good aspects there.
And I think from a business perspective, there's not necessarily an issue with them. And in general, I don't think there's a major issue with injectors as a idea or theory. I think the implementation isn't really where it should be. Like, I think there should be restrictions on what could be fully injected, instantly. But there's like one thing I see a lot of people get hung up on is like, oh well, I don't want SP handed out because I've got 150 million. I don't want some new bro to catch up to me, in like 6 months. I worked hard for this SP. I think it's kind of a stupid argument. Like, we want new players in the game. I don't care if some new player gets a bunch of SP, whether it's through injectors or through daily rewards or whatever, to catch up to actually play the game, because there's nothing fun about playing Eve for 2 weeks and then realizing you can't do anything for a month because you need to train up these skills. So in that regard, I think injectors are fine. They can be good for the game. It's just when you go from an alt that's a million SP and you inject them into a Titan in an hour, I think that's a little ridiculous.
So also, since like it is still a CSM kind of episode, I kind of have to reflect on that. Like, do you think at the time when injectors were first brought up as an idea, do you think the CSM was actually heavily involved? Or maybe
yeah, they were.
You were on?
I wasn't on the CSM when injectors were put in, but I was on the CSM after that. And Gorski Carr, who was like the CSM that I talked to the most, as I was transitioning, he told me that that the first proposal from CCP was a lot different than the one currently. I'm not sure if I'm allowed to say what it was. I'll probably are on the side of caution there.
Yeah. I don't want to get you banned or anything.
I'm sure it's fine, but like the diminishing SP thing, like when you have 80 million SP
that
or more.
Wasn't in.
Yeah, I think that wasn't in the original thing, and CCP added that in after CSM feedback because, like the CSM wanted it to be more beneficial for new players to inject rather than people who are already veterans.
And then but how about like? I agree 100% to what Stitch said. Like, why didn't they limit the injectors to like subcaps only, for example, right? No roll calls, no capitals or any of that sort, right? Is that maybe the same problem or that same challenge that I like said like earlier, that you have in that moment? You have to then be ready and have the answer. And if you don't, and you have to think about it for longer, like we have the hindsight now, right? I don't want to even point my fingers at the CSM or CCP or any of that. Now we have a hindsight and say like, oh yeah, should have been that, But isn't that the exact problem? Like, they bring something up and it has such a like far-reaching consequences that it's very hard to actually say like this is what's gonna happen.
Well, I think the argument with the skill injectors, right, is that you could always buy a character. Like, the character bazaar was always a thing. The one thing that it changed really was, first of all, being like very agile when it comes to changes. For example, I doubt that there was very many Rorqual characters before the Rorqual changes, for example, right? Like maybe you have like 2 or 3 guys in your alliance that has one for mining, because they used to just be like AFK and a POS boosts, right?
Putting up pauses, basically, yeah.
Yeah, you just sat in a POS and gave the mining links to people, and like maybe like 3 or 4 guys in your alliance had a Rorqual trained even, right? So like whenever, I think it's made like some balance problems for CCP, because I don't know, let's say I don't know, for just a random example, let's say CCP buffs the Absolution, for example, and now the Absolution is OP and everyone's flying the Absolution. In the past, like people would probably have to train a more Battlecruiser 5, because unless you're like an old school guy, you might not have that, and then you have to train command ships, and command ships are a pretty strong train. Whereas now, right, you can just say, okay, well, I'm just going to extract Mimitar Cruiser 5, and then I'm going to buy like 2 other injectors, and then I'm in an Absolution.
Well, we already see that now with the Marauder changes. Like, Marauders, like, barely anyone trained Marauders to 5, at least for PvP. You'd have a lot of people complaining about Marauders and be like, oh, I'll train it to 4, I guess, but I'm not going to train it to 5, or they don't have, race-specific battleship to 5. But then once Marauders came out with these current buffs, like, you see it everywhere in nullsec. People are undocking Marauders everywhere. And I'm sure some of them already had it trained up and they're just kind of sitting on it, but I'm sure some of those are also like, oh man, this thing's really strong now. I'm just going to inject straight to 5 and, sit in my RD Varger or, whatever, Pulse Paladin. So yeah, it's like Suitonia said, if a ship comes out that is noticeably strong or we'll say OP, people are going to train into it, and it doesn't really even matter how expensive it is, whether they're going to use injectors or just train naturally. They're going to beeline straight to that ship.
Yeah, I can totally see that. So yeah, hopefully, if you guys get elected and a big change like that is proposed, you guys are going to be in the room and steer it in the right direction.
So, do you think CCP should change injectors now, though?
No,
do you think the cat's already out of the bag at this point?
Yeah. I don't know. There might be ways to tweak it, but like to really change it now, like in a big way, I think that it's too late for that. I think, what are you gonna do, right? Now change it and say like you can only inject 2 subcaps. I mean, you could also argue if the game is supposed to be forever, right? Then it's never too late to make big changes. Because like maybe the players in 20 years, it's none of us. It's only only players that started playing after this era. But that's a dream, I guess.
Rip Citadels and Eve being forever when they changed the the what's it called? Asset safety.
Yeah.
Because they did change asset safety, even though, I agree that they changed it, not necessarily the implementation in which they did it. They didn't have any, grandfathering, but that was definitely something that needed to be changed. So changing injectors to benefit the game in the future, again, you're going to run that same scenario where people are going to be like, oh, well, you're just going to keep the high SP people who already injected as, high SP and people can't jump into capitals, but, but it also means that those same people who have a bunch of alts or who are going to make future alts can't just inject those alts into capitals. So it at least stops the proliferation or slows it down to an extent.
Yeah, I think there's also like another argument too about like how CCP should balance the game, because before the recent changes, like capitals were obviously OP, right? And the thing that balanced them was that how rare they were, like how hard they were to obtain, and how hard they were to sit into. And injectors kind of that broke the like training for a year to get into a cap balancing perspective on it. And then the Citadel changes, with like Suitoya's like infinite slots, raw calls, etc. That broke the making caps hard to get and maintain. And so now we kind of have a situation, right, where the caps are kind of getting balanced again based on being hard to maintain with the gas and stuff, but you still have the skill injector part, right, where it's easy to get the skills because you just paid 10 billion ISK or whatever it is.
Yeah, I lost count how many times I went on a rant about citadels here. Every time I have to stop myself. I don't want to, I'm not gonna say anything. Right? I think most people I've probably heard it like 100 times.
So
But
you want T2 Fortizars in the game, right?
I want Tech to keep stars for everyone. Keep stars for everyone, guys. I think everyone deserves a keep star. High sec, low sec, no sec, I don't care.
As long as I can fit torpedoes on it and take gates with it, then we're good.
Yeah, I mean, why not, right? Well, the gates for like might as well, And a damage cap of 5 million DPS, please, right? But yeah, I don't even want to like. So, what do you guys think? So, citadels. If I had the Hilma power, I would like instantly say, guys, get in this room. We're gonna fucking tackle citadels now, right? That would be my number one issue in the game. What would be yours?
Probably answer Black's gates right now. I really think you shouldn't be able to take them well tackled or in a saber bubble, because I think that would open up a lot more options for guerrilla fighting.
I'm gonna say citadels as well, because there's so many things that they interact with that affect the game. Like not even including nullsec and sov and stuff like that. Like you have faction warfare, which when citadels were released in 2015 in faction warfare, they pretty much overnight killed faction warfare because there's no point in capturing systems when you can plop a citadel down no matter what, and the people you just kicked out can just move right back in. So you have the faction warfare side of it, you have the sov nullsec side of things, and then you have even like small gang interactions. Like back before citadels, you could almost always get a fight warping to a station at 100 and just sitting there and saying hi in local. Someone would pop out with a tornado, try to shoot you at 100,
Yeah.
and there you go, they're aggressed, and you can MJD on them or whatever and start a fight right on the station undock. You could bubble the undock. You can't do that anymore. You just get blapped by the person too lazy to undock by the citadel guns. So, that's one of the issues. There's a lot of issues with citadels in that regard, that they just interfere with too much gameplay.
I couldn't agree more, right? Like, it's a net negative always for content, citadels. And the scenario, I always say, like, it's the fights that don't happen that are the actual problem, right? Because the hunter, the guy that's looking for content, he doesn't even warp to the citadel anymore. Why would he, right? So, and that's the problem, like with station times, right? At that time, you would warp to the station, and there might be nothing there. There might be a guy undocking, you might get a frag, or you might just get baited and you end up as an easy frag. But there is the chance, just the chance of something happen. And now there's not even a chance, because the guy traveling through the system, he's not even gonna bother warping to a keepstar or even a fortizar. Like, why would you? Right? That would be just suicide.
I actually do warp to fortizars and keep stars when I roam, only so I can count the number of people who are docked up and compare that to local. Be sad and then move on to the next system.
That is
because no one's gonna undock from that citadel when everyone's docked up and they see me in local. They're just like, just ignore them, he'll go away.
Or what we sometimes do is, if there's a Sino up, it's super rare, but sometimes, there's a Sino up, you can warp to it, and then there's a cap wrapping it. And then they're not going to doomsday you, because then it will kill their own cap, right? So you have a little bit of room there. You get still PDS and all that stuff, but depending on what you fly, right, there might just be something, like some fun to be had, but you gotta be very, very careful, and it has to be on point. And there's so much knowledge, I feel like, right, that a newbie, he's not going to warp to it and have a good time. It's like you have to know so many little tricks and stuff to even have a chance on it. Yeah,
I really wish you needed to choose between having a bomb launcher and a PDS as well. Like, there was more fitting options on citadels, because like you just have everything on every citadel, right? You always have a bomb launcher, you always have a PDS on a fort or bigger. You always just have all of the tools. Whereas if you had to choose, like if you had, like, I don't know, a special slot where you have to choose between like PDS or bomb launcher, then maybe there's more decision making on like the citadel fits, and then you can do stuff like, this this citadel doesn't have a PDS, so maybe we can do some fun stuff here with kikis or something, or bombers, or this POS. I mean, this Citadel doesn't have a bomb launcher because it has a PDS. So, maybe that opens up more options for different kind of engagements.
Yeah, and the other thing is that like not even Citadels, like not even necessarily weapons on Citadels are an issue. Well, I mean they can be, but I'm just saying like an Athenor or something like that. You're not really dealing with the issue with the Citadel in that case isn't necessarily the weapons. It's like the newts, like the structure newts. The subcap ones are 3 heavy newts worth of cap pressure, but they cycle faster than a battleship heavy newt. And if that Citadel has like 3 heavy newt or 3 of those newts on it, it can wipe out like a Hyperion cap in like 45 seconds. So like a Hyperion could tank an Athenor and probably a couple subcaps, no problem. It's going to get capped out in less than a minute. So there's just like a ton of utility on them, and there's just really no point in fighting on grid unless, of course, you have a fleet comp. But again, I'm not going to go out roaming to people's citadels in a fleet comp just to get some casual fighting. So it's kind of it's kind of a content denier in some cases.
Yeah, I think the main issues with that is like, in my case at least, I think the PDS and the DD from the Keepster. And I was like, I'm not gonna go on the full rant here, but like one part of it is always, why do they even have defenses if they're not being attacked, right? So as long as I don't hit the Citadel and I didn't take off so much shield, it shouldn't even have defenses, to be honest. And then you could make the argument for Athenors and Tataras, give them some guns, give them some defenses for the miners to feel safe again, or safe enough to be out and do something. I think that's totally legit, but we want them to be in space and do stuff. And then maybe tweak the newts, like you said. I've not run into that problem myself personally, so I don't know, but like if you say so, I believe you. That that.
Yeah, I mean, I would probably say it's not a huge priority in the scheme of things. It's just one of those things you add to the pile of the things that are wrong with Citadels. But yeah, I mean, I agree with what you're saying, and that's something I've mentioned before, is that like Citadel should have a siege mode to activate their defenses, whether that's a button they press or a certain amount of damage they take. But I think if the siege mode is something that can be activated at will, it should also have drawbacks. So if it's like on an engineering complex, it pauses invention and engineering items. If it's mining related, it pauses the moonbeam. Just there has to be some kind of detractor from it to say, hey, if there's a rifter on your undock, do you really want to pause your industry services for 3 years just to kill it, or do you want to actually undock and just handle it with a PvP ship?
Yeah, maybe that's the way to approach it. Well, whatever it is, I think we all agree like there needs to be some tweaking there on those citadels, and then on let's say Keepsters, Fortizars, and or everything PDS wise. I think there needs to be more than just some tweaking. Some bigger steps need to be done, but what I thought was interesting, Suitonia, that you said that you went for the Ansiplex as the number one thing to fix. So is that like, I think that's a very realistic goal. And is that maybe the right approach? I wonder. Better push for something that's actually achievable.
Yeah, I think Ansiplex is like probably one of the main issues of why the entire map is blue right now. Like ignoring the war, of course, because it's just so easy for you to just take like massive fleets all around the map, right? In Volta we have them now, and we have like almost like the top left corner of the map, and I can just get from like Eastern Fade to like Western Fade to like Eastern Pure Blind and Tribute in like 7 jumps now.
You know what I always say is, I don't know who brought that up the first time, but someone brought it up on this podcast before, and I totally agree. It's the password thing. Like Ansiplexes, they should only have a password, or maybe you could just switch it to it's only your alliance or a password, right? So you can choose. You can't just and I always call it the ACL everything problem. you can't just like have this ACL and magically everyone like is blue and gets access to everything, including jump bridges, and it all is like, yes, people will say like, oh, but my quality of life, it's so nice and easy. But yeah, should it be nice and easy though, right? In some regard, I think some things shouldn't be nice and easy, and antiplexus is probably that thing that sticks out the most there.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I think you should, like, first of all, like, there's still something that's really ridiculous, is that you can take an Ansiblax in a capital, like the regular ones like Carrier and Dread, while hit pointed. And you can even do some dumb stuff where, like, you put the Ansiblax on a gate, and then you sit a Carrier on the Ansiblax, and then you just put fighters out onto the gate. And then, as long as you can tank for 60 seconds, you can always just de-aggro and jump through the gate, and they can't follow you. Unless they got, like, a drop ready on the other side. That kind of stuff is a bit weird. I think honestly, like, if you can take the Ansiblax while tackled, but with like a scram disruptor, or if you have or if you're in a bubble, it might actually solve the problem a little bit with like blobs and people just taking them. Because like if you could like more realistically just camp an Ansiblax with like a scepter and a couple of dudes, you can just like kill the traffic that's going through there. And also if you could stop people from taking them with bubbles, like you could put up some new like traps for people, you know what I mean? Like if you have like a saber, like let's say Cloak like 10 kilometers from the gate they're going to come from to take the Ansiblax, and then once they land, you like uncloak your saber, you bubble up, and then maybe you can do like a bomb run on like a bunch of people who are just taking it with a fleet or something. Like I think like making it so like it's a lot more dangerous to use Ansiblaxes, and there's potential for like people to like get a ton of kills on them. I think that would be a good solution. And also you could like delay people as well, right? Like if you anchored like a large bubble next to the Ansiblax, you stop them from being able to take it until they kill the Ansiblax, kill the bubble, then they got a 60 seconds weapon timer. So that gives you like an extra 2 to 3 minutes to kill a Rorqual or something, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I think 100% agree. You know what always was weird to me? They made the Ansiblexes, and then people complained like, hey, this is like way different to the old jump bridges. And then the argument was like, yeah, no, you have to see it as if it's player built gates. But then it doesn't act like a gate either, right? Like you said, the hit point, a capital problem, and stuff. So it's kind of still weird. So I felt like it's especially at the start. I forgot, wasn't it like you could also jump with aggression and like all kinds of weird things?
Yeah, I think that was there at the start, but I think that was unintended, and they got rid of it within a few days.
Yeah, but like I remember at the beginning when they were introduced, I felt like we got the worst of two worlds there, right? Suddenly it's like ultra safe traveling these, and yeah, some of these things are still there.
Yeah, they combine the best of both worlds with Posses and Citadels, because the Poss jump bridge back when it was around, granted it was, you could actually put them on Death Stars, but if you tackled someone on those or they bubbled them, you couldn't jump back through. No matter what, if you were tackled or bubbled. So, they were like, okay, well, it's not on a Death Star, but you can still just jump back and forth freely as you want. So it's a little different, I suppose, but it still favors the defenders a lot more.
Yeah, and as Panna was saying, like you had the POS password, right? And if you had the POS password, you could go inside the POS with your guys. Like if you're trying to kill people on the jump bridge, and then you just wait a little bit, then you come out and sit on the jump bridge, and the POS won't shoot you again. So you could just like camp the jump bridge if you had the password.
Oh yeah, gotcha.
And there was also other things you could do too, right? Like you could defang the POS guns, and then you could just camp the jump bridge after that. You just take like, I don't know, 20 guys in cruisers, you could do it. Maybe a bit dicey, but...
Yeah, I always had an idea, but I suspect it's probably OP.
What is it?
Which is that if you hick pointed a jump bridge, you couldn't jump through it. So instead of hick pointing the ship, you hick point the jump bridge. It only works with a hick. You're putting some ISK on field with the hick, and it's going to be can't be repped or anything, but it would prevent, like Suitonia is mentioning, if you tackle something like a capital and there's a jump bridge in the system, you just hick point the jump bridge and prevent reinforcements.
Sorry. You know
No, go
what
ahead.
that made me think of? I had a discussion with Brisk a long time ago about the roles of Titans. What if a Titan could disable a jump bridge too, right? Like,
Right.
because
I mean, that could even be like an expansion to capital roles. Like, there's an issue where like a lot of people are like, there's only a few capitals. You have dreads, carriers, supers, and titans, and they're all basically DPS ships. What if you had support titans outside of fax? Something that was more of a tackle role for capitals. Then you really are putting ISK on the field if you're using a capital to tackle an Ansiblex to prevent reinforcements, which people can bypass with a Sino if they have it set up. But if you catch someone with their pants down and you lock down an Ansiblex with this capital, then why can't you prevent reinforcements?
and now I have like an even crazy idea. So what if, let's say, Suitonia is FCing the 250 man ultra blob, and he wants to take this Ansiblex, but then you decloak with a Titan, you enable your Ansiblex disruption, whatever, and then if they like whatever takes the Ansiblex, you can decide where they end up. So you can bridge then with your Titan onto some Sino, right? And then you could bridge them wherever, right? You could just like do awesome shit. And that's what Brisk and I agreed on back then when we talked about it. Like
Are you saying
if you
if
make
you like?
sorry, what?
I was gonna say, just to clarify, you're saying you could have like the Titan link up to the jump bridge and then use the opponent's jump bridge network to sino people around.
So Tonia's fleet is jumping that jump bridge, and because they're lazy, they didn't scout or whatever, but that Titan just bridges you somewhere else, right?
Oh.
So
the Titan's on the other side and it
yeah,
reroutes
exactly,
to a different
exactly.
Antiblax.
I just came up with it. All right, poke holes into this thing, guys. It's fine. I'm just saying the big point that like I wanted to make was the roles of Titans. If you make Titans just more DPS and more tank than a Dread, like what do you expect? And give him a Doomsday, so it's like the same role as everything else. Basically, it's just an overpowered spaceship then, right? More ISK, and you get more power for it. But what if you give Titans like more of a specific role? Like the bridging is a specific role already. You could have the cloning thing, which is never used basically, but it's a special role. You could do something with wormholes. Maybe you can hold open wormholes or expand wormholes. Who knows, right? Or you do like some jump bridge fuckery ability, whatever. Or like something, right? Some special roles, and the Titan would be exposed, right? Because like right now, you from tether you bridge, and then when the big fight is kicking off, yep, Titans get put on field. But usually 99% of the time, the Titan is like super safe and everything, right? So
yeah, I mean, I think the idea is really interesting. How you describe it. The only issue I have with it being Titans is you're not. Granted, it's a very powerful ability, so it should be limited to something that's very expensive. But maybe Titans aren't the right fit, just because Titans are technically alliance assets, even though we have thousands of them in the game right now. But you're limiting it to basically groups already in power that would have that ability, because they're really the only ones that are going to have Titans. Like small gangs aren't going to have Titans. Our wormholes aren't going to have Titans. But more of a standard capital with that ability could be an option. Or going back to the original point, a hick. Hick is easily available to everyone, so that's an option. Not necessarily redirect them to teleport wherever, but that could be its own specialty ship that has its own high cost to do that. That would be more accessible to everyone.
yeah. I mean, it depends on the ability, right? Whatever you make it, and then like what price tag do you want on it, right? Is it a carrier or dread, or is it a hick? Depends on the ability, obviously. How powerful is it, right? So yeah, I agree. Yeah.
Yeah, I think the key point though, right, is I think we all want like more ways to be able to fuck with infrastructure.
Yeah. Well.
Yeah, and I mean, it doesn't have to be anything gimmicky like I'm talking about. Just general revamp or restrictions, like Suitonia has mentioned about jumping while pointed would go a long way.
Yeah, it would be a step in the right direction, definitely. Right. like what I always say is the number one thing. Whenever I talk about the Citadel thing being the number one thing, but actually what I mean is like opportunities for content creation, right? We're not asking for free content. We just want the opportunity, right? Station games is one, Anti-Black's fuckery, whatever you want to do, right? Like however you create your content, but everyone needs enough opportunities for it. When it comes to like hunting, right? Obviously, there is a very what do you call it? You know, there needs to be, you need to be careful. We've seen that with Blackout, obviously, right? So and I wonder what Blackout was like on the CSM. Were they asked about that or not? I don't know.
It came
Yeah.
pretty quickly after the CSM got added, because I think I left the CSM in like June, and then Blackout was in like end of August, right?
Oh,
That must have been like one of the
like,
first things they talked about.
oh, by the way, Blackout is coming tomorrow. That's basically what it was then. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, at the time also when Blackout came, like the same issue as I said before, right? Are you gonna be the guy who can say with confidence this is gonna be horrible or this is gonna be great? Or, you know, are you gonna have in the moment have that tweak ready? Because they want to push it out next week, you know? That's the tricky part, really, right? And it wasn't as easy to predict what's gonna happen. Like in hindsight, everyone obviously says like easy peasy, but it wasn't that clear what's gonna happen. Right? But yeah. So recent changes. How about those? So we've got the warp core stabilizer stuff. I think from the recent changes, that's probably like an easy one. The warp core stabilizer, it's now active, and it kind of seems to be that CCP is trying to push more into active gameplay, right? So you have to do more a little bit. Is that fair to say?
Well, that's what they stated, right? They wanted to take passive abilities on ship hulls and passives in general and move them more to like active effects.
Yeah. Does anyone have any problems with the warp core steps in particular?
Well,
don't
I
think
think
so.
people, especially if you it's more. I think it's more of like a solo or small gang problem. But warp core stabilizers were an issue for a while because they didn't used to have any penalties, for the auto aggro drone ships like Ishtars.
Yeah.
So in the north, especially, you would find a lot of Ishtars. The standard fit would just be 3 warp core stabs and then 3 drone damage amplifiers. And they still did like 700 DPS, so they still got pretty reasonable ticks from an Ishtar, like 60, 70 mil an hour, multiplied by the DBS obviously. But you just couldn't tackle them with anything other than like a really expensive bling scepter, and ramming an Ishtar with a bling scepter is not something you want to do. So
Yeah, Ishtar wrecking shots say hello.
Yeah.
and a lot of bots were using them too because the havens and stuff that you run, there's some tackle rats in them. So occasionally, if a hunter comes into a system while a bot's tackled by an NPC and it tries to warp off, nothing happens, and then the hunter will probably kill them. Well, the bots started using the warp core stab bits, so now the bots are safe even from the NPCs in the site.
So
I even ran
wait.
across like Cerberuses that would have them on them. Now, granted, they had more penalties against them, but it was actually a PvP Cerberus. It was funny because he was trying to snipe us at range, and we burned his scepter over to tackle him, and then he just warped off. So that was kind of funny, but yeah. So, but yeah, primarily it was an issue with like finding ratters that had him on, and they could just YOLO out without really having to worry about anything except for the most pimp fit malediction or interceptor, whatever the case may be.
So, but it's a net positive change, right?
Yeah, I think
Yeah,
the warp core stab one is. You
Yeah.
also know now as well. What I really like is like people used to use like stabbed epithals and stuff at customs offices. now that they only have 2 strength max, with Warcore Stabs, you know that a Scepter, because you have a scram and a point on a Scepter, obviously, or at least on most fits that small gangers use. You know that you can always hold someone if you have a point and a scram on them, as long as it's not like a Venture or Kader or something.
Yeah. So the big change though is the nullification stuff, right? And I think that's very controversial. And so I'm not even gonna ask any specific question. What are your thoughts on those?
Well, I think I was probably pretty vocal about it on Reddit for initially.
I think I read that. Yeah.
Yeah. On one hand, like I understand from the nullsec perspective the issue it was causing, because they were using nullified interceptor doctrines with weapons on them to basically bypass all defensive countermeasures. So I definitely understand that, and the reasoning is just I feel like there was a better way to go about it, or they could have offered a little bit more concessions to fleet interceptors so they could properly do their role of tackling, instead of kind of gimping them because of this outside influence from this specific fleet comp. Because I mean, fleet interceptors are not meant to be a fleet doctrine; they're meant to be tackle ships. They rely on that nullification to get through, bubble camped gates on both sides, not just one side. To actually catch things before intel catches up. So they could have removed turrets as one option, or hard points from a fleet interceptor, so they could have retained that tackle role, or they could have. I feel like they definitely should have given fleet interceptors some kind of bonus or a full 100% penalty reduction on the nullifier for at least lock range and lock speed, as well as maybe some kind of fitting bonus, just because like the stiletto's already maxed out for your cookie cutter stiletto fit. And if you add the nullification module to it, then you normally have to gimp it in some way to make it fit. So that's my issue. Again, I understand the reasoning why they went after fleet interceptors. It's just I think they could have done it better, and that initial layout that they did in the beginning was kind of completely off base, where it was like a low slot instead of a high slot. It just hurt too many things. But again, that's my initial take on it. And obviously, them trying to put it on like T1 friggin' stealth bombers, I think was just absurd.
Yeah, so on stealth bombers, I don't think it would have made that big of a difference. Right? I'm saying that as like a bomber FC, because you have to decloak to use it. So you can warp in now, or you would have, they removed it, right? You would have been able to warp in like you used to before. You have to watch out for bubbles and all that stuff, but then you would be able to warp out nullified. I think that wouldn't have been such a game changer. Honestly, I don't think that would have been such a big deal, because bombers, they kinda, to be honest, they need a buff. And I'm saying that after, we actually wiped out like a bunch of stuff recently. So I still believe bombers are like in a normal fight, and that fight wasn't normal, I would say. They're not strong. They're just not strong. You're not gonna land bomb runs easily, especially now with the formations. It's super hard to actually land proper bomb runs. It really is, right? And then for those who wonder, like the big bomb runs from the last weeks, that was on a gate, and the server mechanics worked in our favor. I'm not gonna even, that's a common thing though, right? Anyone from the other side who claims like, oh, like this is not fair, it has been done forever like this, forever, right? Seeker would be the first guy to say like, yup, done it all the time, right? Bombing Serbs on a gate, and they should be able to jump, but they're not, and then they die. So it's very normal. So like in combat though, ships anchored up and like bubbles everywhere and all that stuff, bombers are not strong. They're just not, right? You don't see many bombers then, or having big effect if they show up.
And I think part of my issue with CCP trying to expand nullification, which they didn't. So it's kind of a moot point now. But the reason I was so adamant on it when it first came out was, on one end, we have fleet interceptors, which was the primary catalyst for this change, having nullification. Nullsec, and honestly, I think nullsec theory crafters are really interesting, and it's really amusing some of the stuff they come up with, just of how they make it work in fleet fights. But the way that they come up with these things is they, are taking things to the max to find a way to gain that advantage. Which, I mean, that's what all theory crafters do, but it's fun seeing it in a big format like that. If you give nullsec theory crafters or any theory crafters these modules that make you nullified, they're going to find a way to abuse that to gain the advantage. So while initially nullified bombers may not be a huge deal, I don't think it's a far stretch to say sometime in the future someone's going to find a mechanic that works with and fully takes advantage of it, and then we'll be back here 1, 2, 3 years later talking about how OP nullified bombers are. So I think in some reason it's better to just bite that in the ass now and take care of it, rather than let it fester for a couple of years and we address it in the future, because it's inevitably going to happen.
I mean, so I would disagree with the bomber part, definitely. Like, I think there's only so much you can do with it at the end of the day, right? If you play through all the scenarios, how useful is it to be able to be nullified when you're not cloaked? So after a bomb run, you can get away, right? I do not see bombers like decloak, use the nullification mod, then warp in and then bomb. It's just such a delay that hostiles will, it's just too easy to defend it. Like, if you get bombed by that and you get killed, you've done plenty wrong to deserve to be killed in the first place. So it's a getaway thing, which I felt like would have been okay. Like, I'm not saying it would be perfect or anything. I'm all for less nullification, not for more. But on bombers, I think bombers do need a buff, not a nerf. But maybe I'm biased. I don't know.
Yeah, and also think CCP is kind of trying some things out right now as far as the fleet meta goes with battleships, because, I mean, battleships have been neutered for a reasonable amount of time, especially the bombing runs. And there's ways to mitigate that. Defenders, but defenders aren't exactly perfect. They tend to gang up on the same bomb and miss some of the other bombs sometimes.
They work pretty well, I gotta say, sadly.
So, I mean, I guess it depends. I've heard differently from other people where they say that they gang up on the same bomb and they miss bombs, but I guess everyone's experience is a little bit different.
Yeah, so, I mean, if you have 10 defenders and you get bombed by 10 bombs and you hit all the defenders, yeah, chances are there's one bomb getting through, even though it should technically not. I'm guessing, right? I never did that test. But I don't think it fails to a degree where it's an actual problem, right? A lot of, if there's a 50-man bomber fleet, you can only defend so much. So right. People bring more than 50 defenders for that.
I think we've just seen where, I could be wrong, but just kind of going through a lot of comments where a lot of nullsec is kind of tired of hack fleets, and they want to see more battleship fleets. Now, granted, with these industry changes, it's probably not going to happen anytime soon, but there was a change kind of occurring in people's mentality where they were tired of flying Munins and they wanted to fly more battleships. But every time they wanted to fly more battleships, that the Grim Reaper of the bomber would come out and come into the discussion. Now, the warp ends that you mentioned did definitely help with that. So I can see how that kind of changed things drastically. And now we need to kind of revisit it and see, okay, well, is this in a healthier state now, or have we gone too far? And now, like you said, maybe bombers need a buff. So I think that's kind of where we're at now.
Yeah, so I do believe people would fly battleships all the time if they weren't so slow and so expensive right now, right? Like, if you only have to go next door, people would probably take battleships if it's an all-out fight. But for the price tag right now, it's just not worth it. right? They don't trade all that well. They have some good points, but like it's not enough for the price tag. That's what it is. I don't think people don't fly battleships. I mean, the bombers play a role there. Don't get me wrong, but I don't think it's that big of a role. Right? But
yeah, I mean, battleships definitely need some love just from a stat perspective. But I mean, the industry changes have kind of really screwed up.
should battleships be nullified maybe?
Oh God, please no. But I mean,
Nullify for everything.
the industry changes have really messed up the progression. I feel like CCP was making some headway in that regard of possibly seeing more battleship fleets pop up. But now that they're costing 350, 400 mil for a T1 battleship, like you said, it's just not feasible to make a fleet of that, especially when you can get hacks for the same price or cheaper.
Yeah, I guess we have to wait for the Tech 2 rebalance for hopefully Munions will cost 600 mil, right? And then everyone's going to be happy, really happy.
Yeah, I mean, I guess we'll be happy about Munions. We probably won't be happy about like the Vagabond costing 600 mil, but I guess we'll adapt.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the small scale guys, like, you guys don't even care all that much about this kind of stuff, right? Because, I mean, whatever the meta is, you guys adapt quick. You're gonna fly stuff you can afford. You don't have to, you don't have to throw away like a massive config you've been flying for years with the Alliance. Or like in its case, I'm telling you, that's like a pain point. And in it, we have so many doctrines, right? Several battleship doctrines, several hack doctrines, several battle cruisers and frigates and destroyers, like all that stuff. And then suddenly the meta changes completely, and we have to throw away like half of our doctrines. But as a small scaler, like whatever, right? You guys are probably like, it doesn't even matter to you guys, right?
To an extent, I mean, like the hack sig reduction hurt a little bit because we would utilize that sig reduction to mitigate damage against the blob. So in that regard, we did feel that a little bit. Some people initially like, oh, it's not a big deal, we'll be fine, we can adapt. But once you're on that grid and there's 3 or 4 battleships trying to shoot you and 3 Serbs and all this other stuff, it's just you notice that sig reduction isn't there anymore, and you just can't stay on grid as much. Which is why you're seeing kind of a shift in small gang. The Nightmare before was popular, but I feel like it's even more popular now because you have a lot of utility and you don't have a giant signature, so
And
you can still mitigate that damage.
Do people even? I haven't paid attention to that, to be honest.
I mean, you should ask NSH if people use Nightmares.
They had a good fight against you guys, right? Do people use the signature reduction? Like, I forgot what it's even called.
I've never seen it except for on Max. On TFIs, I don't think people use it because it only has 5 mids. But I think on 6 mid armor battleships you see it, but on the 5 mid ones you don't because the E-War is just more powerful.
Yeah, it's that's what I thought at the beginning. This is like an anti-cap kind of thing, right? So you don't get completely murdered by like horde rats or carriers, like so you have a bit of a chance of surviving a little longer. But
or using
I've
it for
never
bombs.
seen it on Max.
Or bombs, yeah. But nobody in nullsec is flying battleships really, so nobody even brings them out. So
yeah, and that goes back to what I was mentioning. CCP is making these strides to battleship, the battleship PvP meta and like null fleets with that sig module, and then the warp informations. And like, all right, well, we did that. We're making progress, but now industry changes, and now you don't want to even fly them anymore because they're too expensive.
yeah. The meta has changed, but the price has changed too. It's a problem. It's a little sad. Yeah, maybe, I mean, the whole industry change kind of stuff is not quite over yet. It will take a while for stuff to, normalize, and who knows where battleships are going to end up. Maybe they're going to be affordable again, and everyone's going to fly battleships.
Yeah, and I mean, I think we talk about the prices a lot, but I don't really feel like these prices are going to be permanent. This is a temporary thing. It's kind of a hard pill to swallow sometimes when you see 350, 400 mil T1 battleships, or 1.1 bill nightmares, which honestly I'm fine with. But um, again, we just got to see how this all plays out, and once the supply chain catches up, especially on the gas side, which it may or may not ever catch up, but once the supply chain actually gets set up for gas, we can actually properly see how prices are going to settle.
Yeah. So to cross off to like check off the nullification stuff. One question: do you think is there a ship type that you think should or should not be nullified? I mean, the should not. I think the scepter stuff, was pretty obvious. But like, do you think there is a ship type that would be good to be nullified? I mean, I jokingly brought in the battleship thing. I probably think if battleships were able to get nullified, it probably wouldn't even be that bad of a thing. I don't think it would matter too much, to be honest. At least they're in space then, right?
It would suck for hunting though.
Well, it would suck for a hunt, but how many battleships are out raiding right now? Is that so
I mean,
much?
you see rattlesnakes quite a bit.
But they're kind of pricey too, right? So
yeah, they are pricey.
You would have to you would have to get them scrammed then, I guess.
Although I think a lot of people just wouldn't use it anyway because it has a 50% drone bandwidth penalty, which is always going to nerf your ratting. I think the people who would use it would be like FOF cruise ravens, which are already annoying to catch anyway, and they'll just be nullified and have a warp core stabilizer because the penalties don't affect it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just throwing it out. I haven't even thought about it much, but it would be a battleship buff. You asked for a battleship buff.
No, I don't think. I think CSP actually got it right with now that they've removed it from Tech 1 frigates. Like putting them just on haulers, I think is cool. Make people a little more confident in moving them through nullsec, and maybe that means that more people are going to get caught because they're like overconfident.
There is some issue with nullification on like DSTs and potentially blockade runners, primarily more in like wormholes, just because that's like the common ship people use to transport their loot in and out of wormholes. Whereas before, with like a DST or a blockade runner, if you're going through the chain to high sec, if someone has like been monitoring a hole and seeing DSTs come in and out, they can set up a bubble and they can catch your hauler. Whereas now, there's really no easy way to catch a DST or a blockade runner if it's fit with both a nullifier and a warp core stab. Short of having like a hick and insta locking it. But again with DSTs, they normally fit a cloak, even though just a standard cloak, so they can do the cloak MWD trick. So they have a cloak, then they have the nullification module, they can have the MJD. They have a lot of options available to them to get through camps. Not going to say that it's going to be impossible to catch them, but the nullification module gave them even more safety to get out of those situations. Now again, in null sec, low sec, the like the warp core stab and stuff like that, and that's fine. It's just the nullification module, particularly with how it interacts with DSTs and blockade runners, does kind of create another safety net for haulers in certain areas of space.
You brought that up. You know what that makes me think of was like when we did eviction stuff, the go-to move, if you get hull control in an eviction, I'm just assuming everyone kind of knows what that is. You take you have control of the wormhole, you would bubble it, and you're flying around it. Like the other side, they would have a problem rolling that wormhole. So maybe I haven't done the EFTing or whatever, but maybe now with the haulers, you have a way easier way of getting a good amount of mass nullified cloaky on that wormhole. And that might just change some stuff in wormhole space. But maybe T3s could have done that anyway.
They did initially release the nullification without the yacht having an additional high slot, which the yacht was used for hole control to roll holes because it was you could gigs them, and they were covert ops cloak and nullified, so they could just roll holes almost fully immune. Sometimes they get caught, but you had to have a specific setup to catch them. So I, when I was talking in like the wormhole discords, I was like, well, maybe we'll just have to use T3 cruisers with nullification and a Higgs rig instead. But then you have SP loss. But yeah, I mean the DST is something maybe to consider. But now that they added a high slot to the odds, it kind of doesn't matter anymore.
Yeah. Well, so what about the last change? And I think that's probably the last point we will get to, which is the observatory stuff. I do have a strong opinion about that, but I'm interested what you guys think about the observatory cloaky changes.
I think the overall mechanic is really cool. I think where a lot of people are upset about it right now is mostly on the cloak resistance duration. I guess we should mention it because it's kind of new. When you cloak for the first time, every time you cloak, you get a 15-minute buff, which stops you from ever being decloaked by this new structure. And 15 minutes is probably fine for most subcaps, although I think it's going to be annoying, I guess, if you're trying to get eyes on something, because a Citadel timer is like 30 minutes, right? If it's a whole timer. So if you want to have cloaked eyes, you're probably getting there like 10, 15 minutes beforehand, and then you're going to have to, like uncloak, warp to a ping, come back.
Well, any timer is really 25 minutes roundabout, right?
Yeah. So right now it's 15 minutes. What I think CSP should do is just buff the faction cloaks. So like there's like Cardinidi cloak, and there's like the Syndicate cloak that everyone uses on supers. If they just gave that like 30 minutes, because you're always going to fit that one on a super anyway. And then if you're an FC or someone who wants the longer timer, you can just pay for a faction cloak, and then you can make the officer ones 1 hour, and then that way it would like make the faction cloaks like really expensive or desirable again, and then that way you can kind of choose the timer based on how much you're willing to spend.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. What about you, Stitch?
And also and also like for people who like multi-box AFK, like cloaky camping stuff, like if you have to buy a faction cloak on all 20 of your Arazus or whatever, then it has like a prohibitive cost, right? So it hurts multi-boxers more. But for just like if you're just an FC, spending 250 mil for a cloak isn't that bad.
Well, yeah, unless you lose a scout on every fucking fleet like I do.
Yeah, and it's good content for the other people, right?
Yeah, I'm happy to provide content for the enemy. Well, what about you, Stitch? What's your take?
So, yeah, I mean that was one of the concerns. What Suitonia mentioned is something that I'm aware of as well. It was like like hyper supers and things like that, where they wanted to kind of how they operate is they would get and kill something, they warp off, and they cloak to recharge their cap, so they could jump out. This is more like solo supers and things like that. Whereas that 15-minute cloak or that 15-minute timer, like that's not enough time for them to prep the jump. So they essentially could not do that anymore because it would just uncloak them. People would combat probe them and they'd die. So even though it is a niche gameplay, it's still a gameplay option. And a common thing that we hear in Eve or is talked about is we don't want to take sand out of the sandbox. So even if it is a small gameplay, it's people still do it. So like what Suitonia mentioned with making certain cloaks extend that stability time, I think is a great idea. Because that would cover those particular instances of hyper supers. If they need to fit an officer cloak to get an hour duration, then that's what you got to do. It's a super, so spend the money for it. But as far as mechanic in general goes, I don't have much of an issue with it. Cloaky camping as a mechanic, I think, is a terrible mechanic. At the same time, I also think it's a necessary evil because of ADMs, and it's really the only way you can affect certain systems. And also with how powerful local intel is, it's again, that's realistically the only way to affect large groups is to shut down their ratting operations and lower ADMs. So, but again, the mechanic itself, I think, is a terrible gameplay mechanic. You're quote unquote going AFK and not doing anything. All you're doing is just scaring people, essentially. um, but as far as the new mechanic goes, I don't really have much of an issue with it. I think it's interesting. Um, I might even use them offensively, so I can go and kill everyone's near two gate eyes that they like to sit cloaked on gates. I may not be as positive doing it, but I'm going to have fun killing everyone's gate eyes. But I think there's definitely an interesting dynamic it can create. As much as everyone hates it, I would like to see some kind of change to local that corresponds with it. Maybe not right now, but maybe in the future. Not saying that we need to go to wormhole space and nullsec, but some kind of interaction to local would be nice. Since we are taking away this mechanic for cloaky camping, unless of course you're active and sitting, at your computer 24/7, clicking your button every 15 minutes. Uh, but yeah, I mean that's kind of where I'm at right now. I'm not particularly opposed to the mechanic in general. Um, and if the super thing gets sorted out, I think overall everyone would be fine with it.
Yeah, I think I agree to like most of what you both said. Someone in chat actually said, which is pretty much like what they intended, right? There's better ways to fix cloaky camping. So I think this entire thing is all focused on cloaky camping. But at the end of the day, my take on it is, I think net, like content wise, it's a net negative change, because I think we will lose content as a result of it. And so my argument would be what Suitonia already mentioned, right? Scouting, like with a char, like hunting guys that have chars everywhere and look around. Like it's not easy to find good targets, right? And I'm obviously biased towards the hunting side here a little bit, right? I'm not going to even deny that. But I think people need to understand, especially CCP needs to understand, they should have the statistics actually. They should know that most of the effort, most of the work that goes into like hunting, scouting, and all that stuff, it's done by a very few amount of people. Like, for example, in Init, it's like maybe 4 or 5 people, right? Maybe, right? We usually have only like 1 or 2 guys really active, right? Shout out to Schwo. And they do like most of the work. And these guys have scouts everywhere, cloak up, and they try to provide content for 100+ people. And then it's not free content. It's not like he finds something and then, he clicks a button and 100 people had fun from all sides. No, a lot of times that results in a fight. Sometimes we lose the fight, and that's content for the other side. So my argument is always, it's like you need to enable people to find that content. And I think someone like a Schwo, he's not going to have as many scouts around. He has it's way more work. It's more stressful. You're on a timer now. Like, ugh, that's so annoying. To me personally, it's so annoying to always have that in the back of my mind. Like, oh, is my scout cloaked? And for how long is he cloaked? Do I have to watch out? These guys, they want to mine, they want to do whatever, and they probably going to put out stuff. If you're watching a certain moon that's going to come out at a certain time, like, oh, they're going to drop something to just make sure, right? But you have to be on the ball 24/7 for that. I think they went too far there. And 15 minutes, it's so short. Also, when it comes to bomber fleets, right? I said, like, bombers need a buff. They get nerfed with that too, right? So, you know how long you sit on a grid sometimes and you don't bomb at all? Longer than 15 minutes. So you have to warp the bomber fleet off. We're all on the right spots, right? You have to warp them off, say decloak cloak. One of them guys is gonna forget about it, and he's like, oh fuck this, right? Then you warp them back on the spot. Someone like, it's gonna be such a pain. And I just think on average it's gonna cost us content. But
I mean, like when I was back when I was in a nullsec group a long time ago, I went on several bombing fleets and even just general fleet form ups. And thinking of it from an FC perspective, hearing him on comms and getting people into fleet and getting people organized, like he's got a lot of stuff going on, or they've got a lot of stuff going on already. And then, like you said, in the back of your mind, you got to make sure you're not, getting decloaked in your scout the entire time while you're trying to, herd your cats. And it's just kind of a lot to do at the same time in that respect. I mean, I guess the only alternative is if you had, going back to our original conversation a long time ago, mains, doing your scouting work, but sometimes you can't rely on other people to scout, or they could be spies or whatever. But yeah, that's those are good points that you mentioned there.
And then someone in chat says, shoot the deployable. Yes, sure. Like the problem is, like, especially in bigger fights, I don't even want to go to Delph-sized fleet fights, but in general, if a fleet has grid control and you want to position your bombers, then you're on a timer, right? So it lowers the chances that we get a good shot at it, because like we can't just decloak with bombers to kill a deployable that's guarded by a shit ton of mutants, right? So it's like, yes, it only has 40k HP, but we still have to decloak to get it killed, which is exposing us, which is usually like a bit of an issue, right? And it can be on a different grid too. So your main fleet, that's maybe also mutants, they might be busy otherwise, right? So you can't, like, it's not always that easy, right? It could have one EHP. I mean, maybe one EHP is a little too low, right? I'd be confident we can kill one EHP kind of structures without dying, but it's going to be deep and bubble, like, so there is so many, there's a lot of issues, there's a lot of work and a risk involved in, right? So I think I think it's not the perfect way to counter the whole cloaky camper thing. And then what you said, Suitonia, I think that's right on point with the faction points and all that, faction cloaks and all that stuff. But I would even go, I would do twice, like, or I would do 2 changes, right? Yours, and then go for 30 minutes as a baseline. Like, don't give me 15 minutes. 15 minutes is so short. This is not 15 minutes, there's nothing, right? You form up for half an hour. That's like a fleet starts for half an hour in most alliances, right? And you haven't even undocked
30
yet.
minutes is probably fine too, right? Because like the change for the most part is mostly to stop people from like AFK cloaky camp, not people who are like actively doing stuff like moving nano supers or doing bombing fleets. So I'm sure that's something CCP can just change, right? Just 30 minutes for the normal cloaks, maybe, and like 1 hour for the faction cloaks.
Yeah, I think 30 minutes would be such a big difference for all the cases that I pointed out. It would be so much better, right? Straight up better. But yeah. What would you take? What would you need to kill it in one volley? It's not about the DPS and you kill it in one volley. Think about it. There is a mutant fleet on a observatory, and it's guarding it. It's bubbled, and you have to now kill it. So what do you warp in then? Right? Do you warp in a couple bombers and just decloak and hope for the best? It's not gonna happen, my friend. It's not gonna happen. So if the other mutant fleet that you have is smaller, they're not gonna warp in and take that fight to kill that observatory, right? So you have to warp back in and out, and then set up, and it lowers the chances, like, of us actually engaging, I think. Like, I'm not saying it's a 50% loss in content, guys, right? This is not like some panic, oh no, this is the worst ever. I'm just saying, on average, maybe there's a little bit of content being lost as a result. Let's say 1%, right? Whatever.
You also have to consider, and I don't know this yet, do we know if these can be remote repped, like the Sino inhibitors?
Yeah, they can, but they have no resistances, and they only have 5,000 armor and 5,000 shields, so they don't really benefit from reps, because like even like a solo battleship can just go through it, right?
Yeah, they're similar to
but I mean,
Sino hips, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, it would still, though, like in that example where you have a bunch of bombers on decloak to shoot it. The opposition's goal is to keep that alive for as long as they can, so they can kill as many of your bombers as they can. So if they're lodging that they're still negating a few bombers worth of DPS.
That will never happen. I'm telling you right now.
It wouldn't. Okay.
No, you would never decloak bombers.
No, I'm
kill a
saying
structure under like some other subcategory. You will never do
in
that.
the example that was in chat where they're saying to decloak and kill the structure. The other thing to consider though is that they might be lodging the structure at the same time. So they're still going to delay you. They're still going to delay you from killing that structure to kill more of your bombers, and then it's just not an even trade.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I mean, like I said, the EHP doesn't even matter all that much. It's the fact that you have to actually expose your fleet to get that thing done, killed. So you will never do that. So it's a fact that thing will be there, right? It will be there. It's inconvenient enough that it is annoying, but that's it, right? It's not as inconvenient that you have to kill it. So the choice will always be to just leave it.
Yeah, I mean, if the cloak timer was 30 minutes anyway, it probably wouldn't make a huge deal to a bomber fleet. Like, you know, if you have to warp your fleet off to like a deep safe and like tell everyone, okay, uncloak, recircle your cloaks again, and then come back like every half an hour, it's not really like a huge deal, right? You're only like losing like, let's say 2 minutes of you like restaging your bombing fleet out of the 30-minute timer that you have. So you're only losing like, I don't know, 9% of your uptime or whatever it is.
All right. Wait a second. Oh, that's a good one. Make decloak grid wides somewhat 100, 200, 200 km. Make the decloak last about 10 minutes. Make cloaky speed. I don't know what you mean. I'm just gonna casually ignore this one. All right. Make the decloak for 10 minutes. Like, imagine. That would be fucking. Oh my god. But yeah. All right. We are actually over the time. I want to point out Sedo let me down here. All right. You all witnessed. But I mean, he got a good excuse. He sent me a message in the middle of this. It's its 21st birthday. Like it was his 21st birthday this week somewhere. And he totally forgot and went out drinking. I'm like, all right.
If it's How does he forget his birthday?
No, he didn't forget his birthday. He forgot about the podcast. And then he made plans with his friends or whatever and got excited. He's a young guy. I'll forgive him. Classic Sedo. It is classic Sedo, gotta say. it is definitely
okay,
classic
Panda. Next time he bat phones you, you just make sure you come like 20 minutes late, you know?
Yeah, exactly. And then I show up like, oh, dude, it was my 21st birthday. Yeah, I wish. All right. I would say thanks, guys, for coming on. I think everyone got a good idea of what you guys are gonna do on the CSM if you get on, and I hope you both get on. Maybe one thing I want to point out: we said that at the start, the whole politics that's going on, right? Hey, you want to be on my ballot? And hey, this number 3 slot on this and this ballot is for sale, and like all this shit, right? You obviously you're not playing this kind of stuff, but do you guys kind of like try to support each other to a degree? Like let your guys know, like, hey, put me first, but to put Suitonia second, or the other way around. I think that would be definitely like beneficial, right?
Yeah, me and Stitch haven't really talked privately about that, but I'm definitely voting for Stitch, and everyone who votes for me should put Stitch on as well.
Yeah, I mean, same thing. I mean, we discussed it a lot in like small game community and stuff like that. Of when you fill out your ballots, fill it out completely for your small game candidates, whether or wormhole candidates as well, because wormhole likes to fracture their votes because they have a lot of opposing viewpoints from the different corporations there. But it's like it doesn't matter if you want to rep on. You need to fill out your ballot. Like, don't just put one person down and call it good. Like, you need to fill out the whole thing. So if your primary doesn't make it, then your second or third might have a chance, and etc. So yeah, I'm definitely going to support Suitonia, and maybe has my second, and then go from there on other small gang and wormhole candidates. So it's just going to be we want small game and or wormhole people on the CSM, so we're gonna fill out our ballots to try and make that happen.
Yeah, when it comes to wormhole people, it's kind of interesting. No big wormhole guy is running that I'm aware of. I don't know these guys. What is his name?
There was one,
Teddy?
but there was one Orin, I think he was called, but for some reason he wasn't. He said he was running, but there was this thing. It happened to Extra Squishy too, where CCP blocked them from running for whatever reason. We don't know why. But yeah.
I mean, to be honest, right? There can be a lot of reasons, and we talked about that super short when you came on, Suitonia. That actually, as a CSM candidate, you have to fill out a lot of stuff, and then you have a passport. And for some people, the passport just isn't whatever, what do you call it, or it ran out or whatever, right? Like there can be a lot of things that can get in the way, Obviously, we can only speculate why certain people are not allowed to run. And what's the point? So I'm not even gonna go into that too much. But yeah. Next episode, I actually thought about doing a wormhole episode, like for the CSM, because I think it is a really good thing to have one wormhole guy on there, or girl, right? I'm not even sure if there's any wormhole girls running. But, I think their chances are fairly slim, to be honest. So
I think Ashy's husband is running. Always forget his last name's like Teddy something.
Yeah, Teddy, I've seen that name, right? I don't know the guy necessarily, but I've seen the name, and I know like some people know him, so maybe there's a dark horse wormhole candidate there. Maybe we'll find out next week.
Foxholer's guy. Yeah, Teddy GBYC, that's his name.
Yeah. So maybe we'll find out if there's a legit candidate there next week. But yeah, I think now we're well over the time, so I'm gonna let you guys go. Thanks again for coming on. Thanks everyone for hanging out. Thanks for the host, Squishy, talking to stations, and who did I forget? Where is it? Who was it? Shit, someone hosted. Thanks. And I would say see you guys on the next one, and bye.
See you. Thanks for the time.
Yeah, thanks.